At the Home Depot, we make it easy to turn your to-do list into a done list with our speedy delivery options. Need something in a hurry? We offer next day and even same day delivery on a wide variety of products. The best part is you can order straight from your couch. Our team is ready to help and get your order to you same day if it's placed by 4 p.m. on select products. When shopping online, filter by delivery to see availability options. Delivery at the speed you need, only at the Home Depot. We are back on the Falcons Audible, presented by AT&T. Your crew is back here. That's DJ Shockley. That's Dave Archer. I'm Derek Rackley here to recap a Falcons loss, unfortunately, last weekend in New Orleans. Falcons dropped to 6-4 on the season. New Orleans, to the chagrin of many Atlanta Falcons fans, improves to 3-7 on the year. So, fellas, let's just kind of dive right into this one. Another one of those that I would categorize as a missed opportunity. I think when you are having the season that you're having, you're undefeated in the division, you're facing a team that's coming off of 7 straight losses, and that is injury ravaged. You're thinking this is a game that you should and need to win. Would you guys agree with that assumption? Okay, should and need to win.
Yeah, no question. Should and need to win. Yeah, should and need to win would certainly be in that category.
So we also know that this is the National Football League.
Yeah.
And on any given Sunday, as they say, right, things can happen. This wide receiver core from New Orleans was completely decimated. We knew that the biggest playmaker was Alvin Kamara. Alvin Kamara didn't even have a dominating performance, but they still found a way to make a couple of plays to end up beating the Atlanta Falcons. So, Arch, I'm going to start with you with a broad question, and this is going to be tough because you'll have to narrow it down to one or two things, but where did it go wrong for Atlanta in this game?
Yeah, I think it started wrong. I think because of the final 3 quarters, I thought they played well, but to condense this down, I thought the start, Atlanta got a very similar start in this game that they got in the first Saint game. Mm-hmm. And remember, you won the first Saint game by smoke and mirrors. You even scored an offensive touchdown and won that football game. But it got started slow, and it was really weird the way it started. You get an unbelievable catch by Ray on 3rd down, and then you've got Drake along the sideline, and he can't quite get the foot down, and that all of a sudden kind of kick-started a slow start for the defense as well. They had 57 yards rushing of their under 100 yards rushing in the first quarter. Mm-hmm. And we had 15. We only had the ball for 3 minutes in the first quarter. Yeah. So it got you off to a slow start. But I thought the team played, especially defensively, played 3 quarters of really good football.
Shock, we always talk about, and much easier said than done in the National Football League, is starting fast. And I think Arch makes a great point. When the other team gets off to a fast start, you get off to a slow start. It just kind of establishes a sluggish feeling for the moment for the game, right? Yeah. And at some point, you got to kind of snap back out of it. And unfortunately, Atlanta really not able to snap back out of it. Was there anything different than what Arch said as far as how you felt like things went wrong for this one?
No, I think Arch's pretty spot on about what he mentioned, especially early in the ball game. And I thought early in the ball game, offensively, you seemed a little bit out of rhythm. And I thought there were a couple throws or maybe a couple situations where you had guys and you weren't able to complete them, whether it's pressure or whatever it may be. I just thought the offense was not in complete rhythm until a little bit later in the ball game, and you start finding Mooney and Drake making some catches. And like Arch mentioned, you have maybe a foot that doesn't get in bounds, and then that could have kickstarted to get you going. But I just thought offensively you just weren't totally in sync in where you looked in a couple ball games where you looked really good starting the ball game. So other than that, like Archie mentioned, it was one of those type of games where it was kind of slow, it was kind of methodical. Of course, New Orleans made some plays, but I just thought we finally got going. By the time we got going, it was a little bit too late.
So let me ask you guys this question, and DJ, I don't think you were there yet. I think you were a little bit younger than that, but Arch, did you go through a coaching change mid-season during your career at all? Do you remember?
Did I go through one? Are you kidding me?
Oh, that's right. I was gone by that time. You did have you were there for I was thinking of Dan Reeves and Jim Mora, but you had the Petrino.
That was my second year.
Hey, Arch, hold that thought. Yeah. Hold that thought.
He might have had the worst one of all time. But.
Okay, so DJ, this may not classify in the same category then, but you did go through a mid-season coaching change that may be one of the most bizarre in National Football League. Yeah. So are there any parallels that you could take from that experience with Bobby Petrino to what New Orleans did with Darren Rizzi, where they kind of rallied behind their coach on an interim basis?
Yeah, I think that was a little bit different because of the way it happened. I think with Dennis Allen, I think the players actually enjoyed their coach. for our standpoint, it wasn't the same kind of attitude and demeanor from the guy that left us. But I'll say this. I think when you have the situation where Dennis Allen leaves, obviously they were really forming players for him. Yeah, I heard Derek Carr talking about him after the game, say this was, for him just as much as it was for Rizzi, who got the win. But I think in this ballgame, you hear so much about how much the team loved him. He'd been around the league for a while. And then this is a special teams guy, so he has his fingerprint on every single player on that team. So it wasn't like he was just an offensive guy. Now he has to talk to the defensive guys. This was a guy who these players saw every single day, and everybody understood what he was about. So I think it's a little bit different scenario from what we went through. I was a little bit later in the season too, and it was a completely done season for us by that time. But I think in this situation where they still got half of the season to go, and the guy that is replacing him and the guy that left are two guys that they actually, want to play for. So you knew it would be that kind of scenario for them.
Maybe somewhat of an unfair question because you might have had the most disaster midseason coaching change in recent memory.
There wasn't anybody that wasn't pleased in the building if that guy was gone.
But Arch, you know where I'm going with this. I mean, I had the same scenario when I was here early in 2000s when Dan Reeves was relieved of his duties. Wade Phillips took over. And not to say that anything was bad with Dan Reeves, but it was almost like the team felt like a little bit of a bump afterwards just because Wade changed a couple of things that we did, took the pads off during practice, and the guys were like, oh my gosh, this was so great, because Dan liked to bang it even late in the season. But did you see anything different in this game that you felt like was a bump from New Orleans because of the interim coach, them playing a little bit harder than they did the last game? Or do you think that this was just rivalry and better execution from New Orleans?
Well, I think it's both, Rack. I think that you're going to get a bump from the fact that it helped them that the Falcons were in the building because there's nobody they'd rather beat in their building than Atlanta. True. But we talked a lot about this last week. This is a very similar situation that Raheem took over here in Atlanta for Dan Quinn. In that season where he took over, after we were 0-5, 0-6 in that season, and you played Minnesota the next weekend, and you thumped Minnesota. It was a pretty good Minnesota team. You thumped them, I believe, in their building, and then you won three.
Right?
You won 3 of your next 4 games. So if you go back and you think of it along those lines, and we also talked about, players. Sometimes there's a little slap in the face or throw a bucket of water in their face. Hey, you're not in this league very long if this is the way you're going to play, because there's other guys coming out of college. We can go get some other dudes.
Yep.
So now all of a sudden your signature is being put on every piece of tape that's being put out there to all the teams. Is this guy worthy of being in the league not only here in New Orleans, but is he worthy to be in the league everywhere else?
Yeah.
And so you're always playing for your job at that point. And there's some motivating factors that kick into that. Now, does that motivate them to play better team football? If you go back and look at it, they didn't really do all that much in this game.
Right.
Atlanta probably helped them more than anything else. They made 3 plays on offense. Valdez-Scantling makes 2 long catches. Yep. One was 67, I think one was 40. And then they had a screen. The only play they made in the second half was a 3-count screen to Kamara that he turns into a 31-yard play. They had 100 yards of offense in the second half completely. Yeah. 5 3-and-outs in a row.
Yep.
So you tell me how much they were galvanized as a team. We missed 3 field goals. We missed opportunity. We threw an interception as we were going into their territory. So all the things that needed to happen for New Orleans to have this energy-building win for Rizzi, Atlanta kind of helped make happen.
Yeah, and just to add a little bit more to what to Arch just talked about 100 total yards on 20 plays. 0 for 6 on third down was New Orleans. In the first half, they were 5 of 7. Kamara, 6 carries, 5 yards in the second half rushing, and he had 50 in that first half. So you're talking about not really giving them or not making the plays. It was something that we absolutely gave to them in this game.
Guys, we talk about this being a 3-phase game, and I don't ever like to single guys out, especially when it's on special teams, because that's where I made my career. But you mentioned 3 missed field goals, very uncharacteristic for Younghoe Koo. And I would just say this, that we can be very critical at times, fans can, broadcasters can, of quarterbacks when they throw interceptions, of running backs when they fumble the football. And I know this because I spent my career on special teams, that everybody wants to say, your job is only this, right? Rack, your job is to snap the football. punters, your job is to punt the ball. Kickers, your job is to make field goals, right? You could make the same parallel for you guys as quarterbacks, as your job is to complete passes and score touchdowns. But guess what? You don't always do that.
Right.
But there's not a person that feels worse about this than Younghoe Koo, because we lose the game 20-17, and we missed 3 field goals. 2 of them were missed, 1 of them was blocked. And you just wonder how that would change the momentum, how that would change the feel inside the building if you get 2 or none less, not more, maybe 3 of those field goals. I mean, that's 9 points that we missed out on. That I think you would make the argument to say that Younghoe Koo is perfectly capable of hitting all 3 of those. Is that accurate?
Absolutely, no question about it. He's been money. I mean, let's go back to week 4. It was Younghoe Koo's 58-yard field goal at the buzzer that won the game for you against this very same team. And he's made a lot of kicks in his career as an Atlanta Falcon. There's going to be some times where he's not going to be quite as sharp as he. And so, what do we talk about when maybe a defender's not quite as sharp? The offense needs to pick him up, or the defense realizes that the offense isn't operating quite as well. We need to pick him up defensively. So if you have some mistakes or make a few mistakes on special teams, and this would count as a mistake or 2 and not making a kick, you've got to pick them up in another area, and so that's why they talk about complementary football. So this doesn't fall. Younghoe missed a couple kicks, and I would say 2 kicks. The other one's blocked. That's not his fault. He's got a ball up that's going to probably go through. We lose protection in the front, and he gets 1 block. So, but yes, he missed a couple kicks. So we got to pick him up in another area. Go score a touchdown. Make a play defensively. Give us another short field opportunity. Those kind of things have to pop up, and you just didn't get those.
For fans to kind of understand the mindset, and Rec, you just made the analogy from quarterback to kickers, and I know Arch could say the same thing. We don't really focus on the ones that you make. You don't really focus on the big throws that you make in a ball game. Oh, that out route was really good. You remember the ones you miss. You remember the comeback that you had a guy.
You're talking about as a player.
As a player. As a player.
Absolutely.
Those are the ones that you galvanize over. So don't think that Younghoe Koo is all about the ones that he's made. This is a guy who is going to take it harder than anybody else, the ones that he missed. And I think it's kind of – you have to think about it in the light of this is a guy who's made so many big-time kicks for this organization. You just mentioned a few weeks back, we didn't score an offensive touchdown. We don't win the ball game unless Younghoe Koo makes a bunch of kicks in that ball game. And you can count a number of other times where he's done that. But I guarantee you, if you ask Younghoe Koo, he can tell you exactly every single one that he's missed.
Yes.
And
why and what he's doing to fix it.
and I think it's just one of those things where, you forget about, what's happened, but I know it's a here and now league and all that kind of stuff, and those moments are big, and you look back at it, but this is one of the guys that's been very dependable for you. He's been a guy that's won a lot of football games for you. You can't underestimate what this guy's been for this team, and guarantee you he wants to have that opportunity. And he said it after the ball game when they was about to go drive, I was locked in, I was ready, and I was going to nail it. So he's got the confidence. He'll be just fine. And, of course, it's a bump in the road, but Younghoe Koo has been outstanding for this organization.
Well said.
As we sit here to shoot this podcast on a Tuesday, Mondays are generally the days where the teams go in and they watch the tape. And generally, when you lose, as we all 3 of us would agree, those are not the best film sessions, but those are the times when the true pros come out, because you watch the tape and you're critical of yourself. Not only are the coaches critical of the mistakes that are made on the field, but as a true pro and a guy that's a team player, number 1, and number 2, you're a competitor that wants to get better. You have to be critical with yourself. And some of those film sessions are difficult sometimes on Mondays. Because especially after all the momentum that you've built up, and then you have a tough loss like you did last weekend. So I know yesterday's feel, again, as we record here on Tuesday, on Monday, was probably not the best day inside the Falcons building, but that's just how things go. So, guys, let me ask you this question. Big picture. Falcons now fall to 4-1 in the division. They still are sitting in first in the NFC South. They still have an edge on Tampa Bay. Where do they go from here? Obviously, we're going to get into this weekend, the final game before the bye week, but where does Atlanta stand? Bump in the road, reason to be concerned, still everything out in front of them, Arch? What's kind of your thoughts?
Think if you're being professional about it, there's always some concern. There's no panic. And I think that Shock talked about, how we grade ourselves as players, and we always think about, oh man, I could have got that ball out a little bit further out in front, or different little things that you need to do better on the plays that didn't go well. That's the piece here that I think is important for today, tomorrow, and as you get into Wednesday, start game planning for Denver, is that you don't allow some of these mistakes and to beat you again next weekend.
Yep.
And that's really all you can do. And I say all you can do, that's what you should do. There shouldn't be any concentration about, hey, bye week's coming up, we'll get some rest. No, you got to be locked in on Denver. And we've talked about it before. The Seattle game was an instance where you got a little bit of slap in the face. Atlanta re-locked in. Now, you hope you don't have to have that many opportunities to where you have to relock, but this is another one of those ones that the ebb and flow of a 17-game schedule, you're going to have some ups and downs in the year. I mean, only one team's gone undefeated throughout. I mean, another team went undefeated and got beat in the championship game. So twice in how long's the league been around? 100 years. Yeah. So you're going to have some blips along the way. And how do you overcome those? Those are the good. That's what the good teams do, and I think this is a good team.
So you mentioned how do you overcome, and let's just go ahead and move forward to this week. And the Falcons are going to go on the road again. They're going to face the Denver Broncos, and this is the final game before the bye week. And generally, at this point in the season, there's a lot of players that are looking forward to that because they just need a little bit of decompress, right? But here's the thing: you still have one extremely important game to play. And so, Shock, I'm going to ask you this question. Going on the road to Denver, if you're on this current roster, okay, you still look like you could play, still a pretty fit young man, okay?
Got to keep up with Arch, man.
Got to put us both in the shotgun and only throw intermediate throws.
No doubt.
Give me a couple of thoughts that's inside your brain. You're on this roster. You got to travel to Denver. You got to play a 5-5 Broncos team, third in the AFC West, right before your bye week. What are some of the thoughts that are going through your mind coming off a loss at New Orleans?
I think the biggest thing is what we just mentioned is we got to make sure that the mistakes that you made in the last game don't come up in this game. You gotta be better with your communication on both sides of the ball. I think that was a big part of this last ball game. But I think as you head into the bye week, you need something encouraging to go into that bye week, because I've been on teams where you go into a bye week after a loss and it sits on you for 2 whole weeks. You got to think about it. You got to watch the tape. You got to watch other people play, and it kind of festers inside of you. So I think the biggest thing is making sure that you prepare yourself throughout this week as you head into Denver to have the best performance that you can have. Because right now you're playing one-game seasons, as you do throughout the entire season. But now as you get ready for the bye week, it's one of those kind of situations you think back, this is a time where we have to put our best performance out there, because if not, you got 2 whole weeks to sit on it. And you do not want to sit on a loss after that, especially coming off a loss to New Orleans. So that's 2 in a row that you got to wonder, okay, are we starting to fall apart? Are things starting to happen that late in the season? Are guys, starting to, kind of feel the wrath of been going through a long season? They've been going, after this game, it's going to be 11 straight weeks of ball.
Yeah.
So, like you mentioned, you're going to need this bye week. You need a little time to get off. But you can't allow yourself to start thinking that, because you still have this one big game like you mentioned. And this is a team that you just talked about, just played a team that was undefeated, and if it wasn't for a blocked field goal at the end of the game, they knock off a team that's undefeated. So regardless of their record, this is a ball club that's played a lot of big ball games. They've already been playing a lot of tight ball games and had chances to win. So the record says they're 5-5, but this is still a really good football team. You just played a team that was 2-6 or 2-7, what it was, and you lost to them.
Yeah.
So it tells you right now in this league, the records mean nothing. All these guys are professionals. They're going to come to play. You're going to their building, and you're playing against a guy that knows his organization really well, and I guarantee you he would love to be able to give this organization another loss heading into their bye week.
Yeah, talking about Sean Payton, head coach of the Broncos, obviously played a lot of games against the Atlanta Falcons. And Arch, I just wanted to ask you this question too, as we kind of dive a little deeper into Denver. To me, this is also a time when you step back a little bit, and at the end of the day, Falcons are still trying to change the tenor of this organization as a whole, right? 3 straight seasons of 7-10 seasons, coming short of the playoffs. To me, this is still like This has got to be a mindset shift, okay? Going into this game and the rest of the season is how do you change the fortunes, or should I call it the misfortunes of years past? And don't let this one turn into the same way. We're going to face the Denver Broncos team that is not great on offense, okay, 24th in the league when you talk about total offense, but defensively, they're 5th at 295 yards a game, and they're averaging 3.5 sacks a game. That's second best in the National Football League. Not so great offense, pretty darn good defense. Some of the things that stick out to you about this matchup against Denver this week?
Well, I think when you start thinking about Denver, you're going to think about the coach and obviously his ability. I think he's been one of the better in-game coaches as far as adjustments go, especially offensively. He's an offensive coach and did an unbelievable job. Now, he had Drew Brees as his quarterback. He loves this kid in Bo Nix. Talking to Raheem Morris yesterday during his coach's show, we talked a little bit about Bo Nix, and they evaluated. Remember, we drafted a quarterback, Michael Penix. They evaluated all the guys that could potentially be number one picks. Bo Nix was one of them. They loved him. They think he's a heck of a player. He's resilient. He's a guy that can make plays with his legs, and I think that's the part that probably about him that jumps out more than anything to me is his ability to keep things alive and create with his ability outside the pocket. That's been a problem in past years, if you go into past years. Now, this year, have we seen a guy like this guy? You saw a guy in week 1 that was very similar to this guy. He didn't necessarily break your back running around with the football in Justin Fields, but that's something you got to be concerned about. Defensively, I think this team, if you go out and operate offensively, I think you'll be fine. This is a defensive team. Yes, they're solid. They do a good job in both run and the pass. They get after the passer if you give them those opportunities. That's why it's going to be important for Bijan and Tyler to get cranked up and run the football out there. But that's just an overview for me. As I think if you go play your game, then you're going to be fine. But if you play like you did this last weekend, where you leave a few cracks in the floor, you're going to get a little leaky, and the next thing you know, you look up and you're down by 10 in the second half, and you got to fight back. That's going to be a tough road to hoe.
Yeah, and Shock, the pass protection was, to use one of your words, a little leaky this past weekend against New Orleans. And Denver, they've got 4 players that have 5+ sacks in this game. 12 players overall have recorded a sack. So much like every single week, but pass protection is going to be key because we know that Kirk is not a quarterback that wants to get outside the pocket and run with it. And his asset has been his ability to push the ball down the field. So he's going to need time to do that. Pass protection is going to be at a premium this week. What else sticks out to you as things that have to happen in order for Atlanta to get off to a better start than they did last week against New Orleans?
I think it comes back to what you guys both said. And one of my keys to this one was you got to stay ahead of the chains. And we talk about their ability to get after you. Surtain on the back end, as we know, front end works with the back end. You start to get sacks, guys throw the football to the other team, and then all of a sudden you look up and you're down by whatever. I think this is a game where you have to stay ahead of the chains. Arch just mentioned getting Tyler and Bijan cranked up. Protecting Kirk Cousins is a big deal in this ball game. I think those are 2 of the top things you have to do in this ball game because of how good they are on the defensive side of the ball. Now, obviously, that the other side, their offense versus our defense, that's going to play itself out. But I think the other side of that coin is exactly where this ball game is going to be won or lost at. If your ability to be able to create plays in the run game, that creates play action, that creates plays down the field, that slows that rush down. Now you can throw the football down the field. Now you have a chance to kind of stay in this ball game because of what they can do. Now they can do a lot of things to you that we talked about when it comes to sacking a quarterback, but I think you have to take care of Kirk in this ball game. We saw last game sacked a couple times. We've seen over the last few ball games, Kirk's had a little bit more pressure on him than usual. That's something we have to shore up because this is a ball game on the road that if you allow that to happen and you look up and you got a guy in Bo Nix and Sean Payton who understand they've been in a lot of ball games that at the end of a ball game they could have a chance to win it. I think they learn from that. So you got to find ways to be able to put the pressure on them and force the issue and force that young quarterback to go try and beat you as opposed to you trying to battle back because you got down early.
I think we both could, all 3 of us, could probably say at times in our career that we went into a bye week from a loss and we went into a bye week with a win. So, Arch, last question for you is, how much does this improve the psyche of the players if they can go on the road, get a victory, and go into the bye week with a win coming, because you always come back from a bye week refreshed, right? Whether it's win or loss, you feel like, okay, I'm re-energized. Now we got the final stretch of the season. But you think about this stretch, right? When they come back, they got a home game against the Chargers, and then they're right back on the road for 2 away games at Minnesota and at the Raiders. So how important is this for Atlanta to go into the bye week with a win with what they have coming back out of it?
Well, I think it's important, Rack. There's no question. I think that's easy. Anybody could say that. It's important to have a good feeling when you go into your bye week that you're going to come out. You just mentioned you get the Chargers and the Vikings. When you looked at the schedule to start the season, Chargers are changing their staff, much like Atlanta did with Harbaugh, and you're thinking, okay, well, Herbert was a little banged up, and you're probably not overly worried about that one if you start looking at the schedule. And the Vikings are supposed to have a rookie quarterback plan, and that hasn't happened. And Darnold, so all of a sudden you look up, and those are two teams that are pretty good. And now you're going to play a team this weekend that's pretty good. So thinking about what happens after the bye week is a little daunting. If you can stack a win here, then that makes you feel a little bit better coming out of the break that you can go win some games in December or late November into December. But yeah, it makes you feel better about yourself and all that. There's a lot of young players in key positions on this team, and so. Young players, we were all young players at one point, and your emotions ebb and flow. As much as you try to be professional and stay even keel all the time, younger players haven't seen as much in the league, and so their emotions are going to change and kind of flow as the team flows. And you try to level that out as you get further on in the league. Or further on in your career, there generally does. But right now, there's a lot of young players, and so if you go in with 2 losses into the bye week, that's going to be disturbing to those guys.
Yeah. So as we mentioned, Atlanta on the road facing Denver Broncos this weekend, 4:05. So a little for our East Coast viewers, it'll be a 4:00 window to
Justin Simmons going back home. Huh?
Oh yeah, place that he's had a lot of success too.
Yeah, you've got to figure he'll be a little motivated. And that was a good job by the defense. Real quickly. I thought the defense did a really good job of changing the tempo in the second half. Jesse Bates makes a play in the backfield on second down. Simmons makes the play on third down. Boom, all of a sudden New Orleans is out, and New Orleans puts a string of 5 consecutive 3-and-outs. Those 2 veteran safeties stepped up. That's what you're going to need a little bit more of. And talking about protection real quickly, we didn't talk about Caleb McGarry is going to get a lot of blame this week because of what happened. If you go back and look at the tape, McGarry gets tripped by 2 of his own players twice. Yep. He slides inside. He's setting. He gets hung up with Lindstrom. Lindstrom may have set a little bit too wide. He trips McGarry. That leads to one of the sacks down in the red zone. And then Bijan Robinson, who's sliding up inside to take one of the backers, he trips him. And so he was a victim of his own guys. He's set in good position. Now, does he get beat? Maybe at some point, but he was in good position on both those plays, and he tripped over 2 of his own players. Those are things that can be corrected. I'm not saying that he's not at fault because he's the guy blocking the guy, but let's calm the roll on that. Oh, they're just going to overwhelm us on that right side. I don't think that's the case at all. Caleb's had a really good season this year, and I think he was just a victim of a couple screwy setups there.
Lindstrom a victim as well, tripping over one of his guys. Yeah. Call for the tripping call. Unbelievable. So, yeah.
So kind of some screwy plays. But, yeah, I'm sorry to divert and go back to a couple things in the game, but that was – Those are something we pointed out.
QBs looking out for their boys.
Well, I mean, and guys, at the end of the day, that's true. You always hear coaches say, well, we need to look at the tape, and then they come in and they talk about a press conference afterwards, and they go into some of those plays. And to the average fan, they don't care because it's a loss. They feel like we played bad, but it's when you actually dissect it, you're like, well, that was unfortunate. That's probably not going to happen again. That was unfortunate. That's probably not going to happen again. There's 2 other plays here and there, and one of my college coaches used to always say that, like, the difference between, this is back when we played 11 games, right? 3-8 and 8-3 is so small you blink your eye, you miss it, right? And basically the whole thing was you make a couple small mistakes in critical spots in the game, and that's a difference between a win and a loss. Yep. And you do that 4 or 5 times, and then all of a sudden you're 3-8 instead of 8-3, right? So the whole thing is, hopefully this week the guy's not getting tripped, right? Yeah. Just don't get tripped.
You hear it all the time in this league. Oh, it was a 1-possession game, and it happens all the time in this league. And you never know which play it is. That same thing. Coach used to tell all the time. You never know what play it is. It could be in the second quarter. That could be the play. You never know. So you always got to play them to the fullest. So you never know what happens in these ball games. It's always a tight, close game. We haven't seen many blowouts going around the National Football League. So you never know what can happen at the end of a ball game or any possession. They all matter.
Falcons came on the wrong side of it. But, guys, this is part of the reason why I love the National Football League. It doesn't matter what your record is.
At all.
Any weekend, because there's pros on every single team.
You can get it.
And they make a couple of plays, and all of a sudden you look up and you're like, how did we lose that game? Right? It's happened to all of us, hasn't it?
Yeah.
Sure.
All right, 4:05 p.m. this weekend on Fox. Falcons traveling to Denver to play the Broncos. And honestly, I don't know whether or not we'll be here next week because sometimes everything shuts down on the bye week. So we may not be here next week to recap it, but we'll be back the following week to give you a little flavor on the Broncos and then get ready for the next game, as we mentioned, against the Chargers. Thanks so much for joining us here on the Falcons Audible presented by AT&T. Like, subscribe, review at Spotify, iTunes, AtlantaFalcons.com, and YouTube. And we will be back next time to give you all the Atlanta Falcons podcast. Thanks so much for joining us, everybody. Take care.